Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Solitaire the Gathering podcast. I hope you're feeling happy and hydrated today. I hope the sun is shining where you are and you're feeling good about your life. Today, we're going to be talking about some new exciting things, some old, unexciting things. But before we do that, I will introduce myself. My name is Sharif. My internet name is Micrograms. I'm joining you here from Canada. And now I will lead it to my co-hosts to introduce themselves, Robert, Riker, and Sam.
Hello, I'm Robert. I'm also known as Bob49 on Magic Online, and I'm tuning in from Austria.
Hello, I am Riker, also known as Dredge the Bed on the internet. I'm tuning in from the United States, and I'm excited to be here with my wonderful co-hosts.
Hello to everybody. Sam, known as Ashanti and MTGO, joining from Argentina, but actually I'm from Germany.
Thank you guys so much for the introductions. It's so great to hear your voices on this lovely day. Now, we're going to start things off with a little bit of a drop-off from where we ended or where we started in our last longer episode about the new Capenna cards and how that's going to change our deck. Now, we've introduced an offer you can't refuse in combination with Noxious Revival for a pseudo Rite of Flame effect for our two-land recross piles. I've been feeling pretty good about the new additions, so I'm going to ask some of you guys what you feel and how you feel about the new cards. Which one do you think is better? Robert, do you want to lead this one off?
Sure. So, an offer you can't refuse and Noxious Revival were very good additions. They are cards that you can actually use in a game of Magic outside of a stacked deck, unlike Pact of the Titan and Infernal Plunge. And it has just felt great. Noxious Revival has come up so often. It let us cut a Bala Ged recovery from the main deck. So it's just very useful. We can blank surgical extractions with it. We can make a second win attempt with the Noxious Revival if our first one gets countered. We can blank Ragavans, or we can put a card on an opponent's library to prevent them from top decking in answer to our Belchers. It just has so many uses. And an offer you can't refuse has also been useful, countering Living Ends, other counter spells that want to stop us. These two cards have just been great additions.
I'll jump in here on this topic real quick. There was concerns about having to create a 7-pile turn 2 win instead of a 6-card pile, so we became weaker to Ragavan, but I did want to say I think the benefits of Offer Noxious greatly outweigh the negatives that we were expecting. Yes, Ragavan is still a concern, but we have piles to work around it. I haven't played as much Belcher as my co-hosts here have in this last month, but I have enjoyed the Offer Noxious pile quite greatly. And I did want to just say real quickly, Goldhound was a bust, unfortunately. I tested the card. I didn't see enough Ragavans where it would matter, but, you know, that's what we're here for, right? We're here to give you answers on cards we test.
Who knew? We said the card was bad, so we had to test it and make sure it was bad. It's okay. Sam, I know you don't play as much Belcher, or you've been dipping your toes in there a little bit less than us, but do you have any opinions, or do you have the same feelings about these new cards, new additions?
I definitely think that Noxious Revival and an offer you can't refuse are just as a card better. I have been playing Belcher again. Unfortunately, for once has escaped in different opportunities but it's also because it's a deck that is not just so easy to pick up, and just when you really need, I felt myself again to relearn the deck, to relearn the piles, open your mind when you're working on the piles. Or if we think that we lose to a single Ragavan, then I think that we're not being creative enough in our piles. And I have seen Sharif playing a lot during the challenge, and other different players also with Belcher. It's all about how you construct. And after the games, you also rethink the piles that you did, and you came to the conclusion that there was a different pile that might have been like the solution for it. So again, if you want to pick up the deck, I would definitely of course, I recommend Offer and Noxious. The 2 life that we lose, I don't think it's actually something like really important. It's not something that came out so much. I never lost because I had like 5 life and I needed the 2 life of Noxious and the untapped land. So that's never happened to me, but it might be something that can happen. But my conclusion is it's definitely better.
Yeah, I have lost. I think I lost a game today actually because I was at 5 life. But I think again, it's just it outweighs that for sure. And backtracking to the Ragavan talk, I think since we can't really put double Reforge on top, since we now require 7 cards if we're going off 2 lands, I began playing with 1 Reforge. I've been doing it for probably the last week and a half, 2 weeks maybe, and I felt pretty okay with it. It does have like the Griselbrand effect in Neobrand when if you draw it and you're only playing 1, you can't use it anymore, unless I guess you put it back with Awakening. But I've been feeling more or less comfortable with this since the main Ragavan deck is Murktide, and I'm not a huge fan of Reforge in that anymore since it kind of gets messy, especially if they have Ragavan, and you usually require some sort of backup to make it work because it's a must counter spell rather than like something like Valakut Awakening where it's like it's a lot more ambiguous whether or not they should counter it. They don't know what's going to happen, but drawing 7 cards, fresh 7 is definitely screams counter me. So I don't know, Riker, if you've been playing with 1 Reforge. I know, Robert, you were playing briefly with 1 Reforge. If you have any thoughts on that, go ahead.
So I tried the 1 Reforge at your recommendation. It has been fine. You certainly draw it sometimes and then you have issues. If you are creative enough, you can usually solve those issues. But sometimes you get into situations where it takes an extra turn to win, but you can draw into some cards that lets you interact on that turn. So you're very likely to survive. For example, if you're playing against Hammer, you might draw a Force of Vigor for 1 turn, and then you go from there. Against Murktide specifically, the Reforge is indeed not a great card. I've been also trying different pilings against Murktide, and generally, the plan against Murktide seems to be to resolve the Belcher and protected Belcher. Recross is not that great in the matchup because you cannot protect it with Pact of Negation. It makes good counterbait so that the opponent uses up their counterspell and they don't use it against your Belcher. And often when they do let your Recross resolve, your best bet is to stack multiple Belchers or Pact of Negations on top of your deck anyway, because there's just too much that can happen that you cannot play around. There are Ragavans that could exile from your library, that could exile from the top of your library. They can manipulate the top of your library with Archmage's Charm, and they just have so many counterspells that you cannot easily play around. Another option I've tried against Murktide has been Empty the Warrens, which allows you to play a little bit around the patterns that they use against you, because usually they want to counter your payoff, so Belcher or Recross. But if you play multiple rituals into an Empty the Warrens, then your payoff is basically uncounterable. So they would be better off to counter your last ritual in that case, but they of course cannot know that. This might make them counter your rituals more often in other games where you already played Empty the Warrens, but that's already an advantage for you because that means that they play suboptimally every time you don't have Empty the Warrens.
Yeah, I'm still on to Reforge, and that just might be I'm very superstitious when it comes to Magic. I feel if I play 1 Reforge, I'm going to always draw it, which is a big downside. But as Bob was explaining, Reforge has kind of Recross the Pass has been a little less valuable in a lot of matchups. It still sets you up for wins, but if we're not trying to enable the recross as much, we only need to play one Reforge. I think the one Reforge is definitely a meta call. It really depends on what you expect to play against. If you think you'll see Ragavans, etc. Unfortunately, I haven't played a lot of Belcher. I've been playing a lot of Oops, but I don't know if we want to segue into Oops yet, so I'm just going to throw it back to Sam because I know he's been testing some wacky stuff in his Belcher list.
Yeah, I have been testing Ignite Memories, and I always have been testing Eve. So I already was on the Storm cards because when I started with the archetype, I won my first 5-0 with empty warrants in the main deck. So it was something that I kind of think it's a great card. The mechanic of Storm is really hard to interact with if you don't have like Flusterstorm, and if they already, as Bob said, counter your rituals, you will normally have your payoff still on board, and that's the Belcher. So, in my opinion, I think these are cards that we can still consider and work over. For sure, Empty Warrants is the less mana intensive. Like Ignite Memories is also pretty easy, but if they have Leyline of Sancticity, then it's kind of like it's a problem. But I didn't have this problem. Ignite has been really funny to play. For like 7 or 8, they're normally totally dead. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, guys, I'm thinking Ignite is hilariously good against Murktide because if they reveal a Murktide, that's a shot to the face. There.
4 times revealed a Murktide. It was so fun. I forgot to send the screenshot of that. I do agree also with the Reforge. One single copy for me is more than enough. Why? Because normally I always take it out. This is one of the first cards that I always take out, basically in every other matchup that weren't like with the double Reforge pile. But still, it's not coming up. The double Reforge pile enter turn and then like cast Manamorphose into a Reforge and another one. I think we have other piles that now helps us enough to find a solution with that. So I agree that we should be playing one Reforge.
Great. Yeah, so with new flexibility, I feel like Belcher and Oops, I think, are in a better meta spot than they were a few weeks ago. We've just talked a bit about Belcher. I think we should maybe talk about Oops and how it has progressed and how the state of the metagame favors it. Riker or Sam, do you want to lead that off? Yeah, Riker, go ahead.
Oops feels great right now, in all honesty. Not too much has changed with the list, but it's just been performing really well. I stand by my statement that the Graveyard Hate that is played to answer Living End is not as great against Oops. Oops can usually get around that hate versus by blowing it up or just having the Thoracle package. And to those of you who don't follow the Discord, me and Sam have been described as an old married couple because we always have very, very different opinions on how we should be creating our Oops lists. And it's always the sideboard. I still stand by Teferi as a good sideboard spot. Currently, I'm not playing it. And that's mostly because Murktide has moved to Ledger Shredder, and with the addition of Ledger Shredder, that's less counterspells for us. So I don't see the need to have such an aggressive counterspell hate piece. Oops hasn't shown up in a lot of big tournaments, and I really, in all honesty, I think that's just because it's not being represented, if any. I'm hoping that I can make a challenge, hopefully this weekend, and I'm going to bring Oops to it and see how it does. Because more than ever, Oops beats Murktide, which is a crazy thing to say, but I feel very positive when my opponent is on Murktide when I'm playing Oops. I've had plenty of matchups where just slamming the Spy early enough after they cast a bird will get me there. But there's also matchups where Belcher has felt very valuable against the Murktide decks. And now the big discussion that me and, I won't say argument because it hasn't gotten there yet, but the big discussion that me and Sam have when it comes to Oops is the sideboard slots. A big one right now is Fragmentize versus Prismatic Ending or Void Snare, whatever your poison is. I feel Fragmentize is a lot more valuable in Oops currently. We see a lot more Urza Saga, Artifact and Enchantment hate pieces versus where Prismatic Ending we would need it for Sanctifier or is it Voidwalker, right? And fortunately, Voidwalker sees very, very little play at the moment. Not a lot of the Rakdos lists around, so we don't have to worry about it. I'm favoring Fragmentize. I like being able to hit almost anything against Amulet Titan, Hammer Time, these decks that rely on their artifacts or enchantments, whereas Sam has been trying kind of an even split between the two. I'll let him hop in here because, I could go on for a while. I've been very successful with Oops, and so has Sam. He's even 5-0'd with that list as of today that we are recording, and I'll let him give his thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Riker. First of all, and I think that is something that I want to mention, I have been making a big change in my main board. I took out Thassa Oracle and the Jax from the main deck and swapped them for Pact of Negation, because I think with all the 4Cs, there are so many endurance main deck counter spells. Hammer Time dropped drastically, so there are not a lot of decks that put a lot of creatures. The main problem is always to push enough damage with the Vengevines, and if they have some blockers, then that's pretty sad, because they can block it, and you will probably lose if they can sustain the defense enough. So now I have Pact of Negation in the main deck instead of...
It's huge.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to start to cut you off a little bit. It's usually not game over, though, if they can produce blockers for Vengevines, because the new way, if you take out Thoracle, you just put in a Nexus of Fate, or I believe, Sam, you do Genesis weapon?
No, I use
Legacy weapon.
No, I use Nexus of Fate in Magic Online, but I don't use it in real life because it costs like $25. So I use Legacy weapon in my URL.
So even if they do produce blockers for Vengevines, we can buy ourselves up to 2 extra turns, I believe, because you can Phantasmagorian the Nexus.
It really depends your hand. So it's not like you have 2 more turns. It's normally like 1 turn more. If you didn't use your Phantasmagorian to discard any, let's say, Swords of the Meek that you had in hand. So again, but I still think that Pact of Negation is much better. It makes us room for Pact of Negation and Nexus of Fate, as Riker said. And then regarding the sideboard, I'm not playing Teferi because I think it's still horrible. I tried it only once and I didn't like it. It's still a great card, but it's not. It in my opinion, just don't belong into this deck. Trying 3 Fragmentize right now and 2 Prismatic Endings. I think that's okay. Leyline of the Void has been coming up kind of a lot. And as Riker also said, Urza Saga are being played more, so Fragmentize can instantly just destroy the land and we're ahead. And then the rest of the sideboard is still like the same. But I do agree that there is a lot of benefit now that other decks are playing cards of Street that are more relevant for them, and that gives them more advantage against other decks, but not directly against combo decks.
So the sideboards are almost the same, but except for the aforementioned Thoracle combo has been taken out of the main, but we are still playing it. I do agree that Thoracle should be moved to the side, but when you move it to the side, it just involves having a single copy of Thassa's Oracle, Memory's Journey, and a Jack-o'-lantern that you can side in for those certain matchups. I'd also like to point out that Thoracle is also a very unique... it's a very unique package to bring in versus decks that do bring in graveyard hate, because Thoracle will get you around certain amounts of graveyard hate. when I was testing Thoracle on the side, I didn't feel like I ever brought it in. And there was a lot of times where I feel like I should have, because my opponent would go Soul Guide Lantern. And I go, well, I have a spy and I can beat a Soul Guide Lantern if I had Thoracle in my main, or just in my list in general. So Thoracle should go to your side, but I think you need to be very aware of when you should bring it in. That's what was catching me up. It's still a very, very powerful package to have. And with the rise of Murktide, as we go away from our sideboarding a little bit, with the rise of Murktide being everywhere, you can't play a Magic Online League without seeing it at least once. Murktide has shifted to Ledger Shredder, which is the 1/3 Conniving Bird. Connive, I believe it's Connive. And that's been very good for both Belcher and Oops, especially for Oops, since a lot of their counter magic that they bring in from the side is non-creature based. So when they have more creatures to play, Oops will just fare better against Murktide. And I do want to ask our other players, Sharif and Bob, how you guys feel about Belcher versus Murktide.
Yeah, sure, I'll get in on this. So I'll touch on Ledger Shredder as 2-mana bird that if they're playing that on turn 2, it opens a really big door that was previously not there for us to try and cast a spell, because that was previously taken up by like a counterspell. They probably still have counterspell in their hand, but they're deciding to sort of be more proactive and try and sneak it in there if they can. Which is really good for us, because their win con against us is not letting us resolve any spells, and them tapping out means that we can resolve a spell, which is definitely a huge step in the right direction. But Murktide in general is very frequent. As Riker said, it's pretty hard to dodge it in a league, which I don't think is necessarily the worst thing. It gives us practice. It doesn't we don't get to eat everything for free. Because I think right now Belcher's actually in a really, really good spot, especially for grinding leagues, and we can talk about challenge metas later on. But I think it's in a really solid spot, even though there's a lot of Murktide, because it's sort of we're getting practice with it. And Robert, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, Murktide is everywhere. You will play against it if you play a league. The more I play against it, the better it seems that I'm doing, because I think there is a lot to learn about the Murktide matchup that I didn't know previously, and I think I'm not making a lot of mistakes against Murktide that I used to. It's, for example, very important to focus on resolving your Belcher, because your recross is very hard to protect, because you cannot use Pact of Negation. Other than that, Ledger Shredder gives us often an opportunity where they tap out early on. They did have a card previously that would allow them to do this mistake, which was Expressive Iteration, but that was not something they would commonly do, if only because it means they are not getting full value out of it. Other than that, I'm not sure what they have cut for Ledger Shredder. I think it is extra Archmage's Charms or Spell Pierces, both of which were good against us. Ledger Shredder is much less good against us. So overall, the matchup is improving.
With the addition of Ledger Shredder, I still think that Murktide is fairly favored against Belcher, even with the bird. But the issue now for Murktide is that a lot of Murktide players are presented with more lines where they can go, I could play a bird here and start drawing a bunch of cards. And so now it takes a very skilled Murktide pilot to pilot a win against Belcher. Like, if any of us were on Belcher versus Murktide, we could probably win over anybody who's not piloting Murktide almost to its peak now. Murktide just has more options for it. Coming back to Oops for that, I'm going to ask Sam a question here too about it. I think it's interesting that Sam has moved to Pax in the main, which does help against Murktide. But in general, Murktide, so Oops hasn't changed to fight Murktide, Murktide has just kind of gotten worse against Oops. With us being a creature-based combo deck, their sideboard slots don't really help them. and their only main deck spells that will stop us from just winning is Counterspell and Archmage's Charm. And now they're on less of those hard counterspells, which is great for us. And I do want to ask how you feel Oops has been holding up against Murktide, Sam.
Like, the only thing that right now they are playing is Dress Down. That's the only card that in the sideboard is really relevant. I also I never saw them play any specific graveyard hate, like Atomic Crypt or something like that. I don't think that they're playing right now something like that. So yeah, from my side, in my opinion, it's not. I'm not saying that it's easily beatable from the Oops side to against the Murktide. They still can have a clock on board on turn 1 and start beating us down and countering everything. Like, if they counter the first rock, then we might be in problems already because we only have one rock in our hand and we have all these different lands that don't generate any black source. So that's something bad that can happen. But by the other side, yeah, Pact of Negation has been great for me. And I also had some situations because people are playing the new Jund Charm that came out, and the Jund Charm exiles target graveyard. So it also came...
Riveteer's Charm.
Yeah, Riveteer's Charm. Thank you. So that's also something that happened to be relevant. And just now I feel to have the Pact of Negation is just better. Because the odds that you need Dath Oracle on game 1 are really low. So I think we just get more having some counter magic. Yeah, that's basically my thoughts. I think I feel better now that they're playing the Bird. The Bird just took out a lot of space of non-creature spells that they're using. I think they caught a Spell Pierce, they cut some Archmage Charms. They are still on 4 counter spells. They will never go down or lower that, but everything else that might have been a pain for us, it's now not more anymore in the main deck.
Well, one of my loves, always got to appreciate, Pact of Negation is one of the best Magic cards ever printed for us, because we hate counter spells, but what if we get to use the counter spells, right? If my deck doesn't have Pact of Negation or Leyline of Sanctity in it, it's probably not a deck I'll enjoy.
Yeah, we love 0-mana counter spells when we're winning on the same turn. So we chatted about how Belcher and Oops are doing in the current meta. I think most of this is sort of bound to leagues, I think, as most of us haven't really played a lot of challenges. I did play one challenge recently that I think I should probably talk about, as it sort of displays some of the recent meta shifts. So I ended up going 5-3, which is fine. It's whatever, I'm over it. But the matchups were the really interesting part. So we played, I'm not going to go over the order because I'm probably going to mess it up, and that's of no use to anyone. So I played against 4-color 4 times, Calibrated Blast twice, Affinity and Hammer Time each once, which I think that's correct. That's 8 matches right there.
Sounds like you should have 8-0'd that.
I should have, yeah, exactly. Some of the matches felt a bit unwinnable. I had some pretty gross experiences, but some mistakes were definitely in my hands, which I think I should talk about now. One of the 4-color matches was a pretty interesting spot because I resolved Recross, in which they responded with Eladamri's Call, fetching up Meddling Mage, which, I mean, they gave us the information of that, which is probably not a great idea in the first place, but they also had Boseiju in the yard. We didn't know what was in their hand, and it was up to me to decide, am I going to play around like possible Dovin's Veto? Am I going to play around Wrenn 6? And I also have to get rid of this Meddling Mage because I don't think, for whatever reason, I think Ascension was not an option in that scenario. I can't remember exactly why, but I'm sure I would have directed towards that if I had that option.
I was there for it. I think the Ascension was in your hand.
Okay, interesting. Okay, maybe that was the case. But anyways, I decided to sort of go for a direction which I would Shatter Skull the Meddling Mage and then kill with Splice Rituals with Belcher on the same turn. And I think I dipped too much into the idea of playing around like an instance of counter magic rather than giving them the possibility of like just playing Ren and 6, returning the Beseiju, passing the turn with like also playing Meddling Mage. I didn't give enough thought to that scenario, so I sort of lost out to double Beseiju the following turn, which could have been avoided since I think I had like 2 Veil Summers in my hand, so I could have catered my Awakening pile to whatever happened the next turn, since I had the option to put back the Veil or keep it in my hand. So that definitely would have been in my best interest, but I didn't think of it at the time. So that was definitely a learning experience. So that was one of the losses, and we lost to Affinity. Game 1 was pretty rough. I think they killed us on turn 4 when we were on a mold 5, and we were just like 1 turn too slow. And game 2 was pretty gross. I think I probably made a mistake in mulliganing, or rather not mulliganing the 6-card hand that I kept. I think if anything, I would have gone back and done that a bit differently. And so that was lost. That's sort of, I believe, half my fault in terms of the mulligan decision. And the final loss was to Hammer, which I think was just a total flip of a match. It was really close, but I just couldn't get through there. He had 4 hammers, game 3. It was pretty hilarious to see that. I've never actually seen that in a league or any match like that before, but pretty high quality games in general. And I think I got a good mileage out of it. But that definitely shows that there's a lot more emphasis on 4-color, especially since I guess Demonic Tutor's won a challenge with Elementals, but it's also just been showing up a lot in like top 8s or top 16s, pretty dense in challenge results, as well as like decks like Yawgmoth and things like that, where it's not super saturated with like Murktide or Living End like it was a few weeks ago. But I'm guessing that's probably just a reflection of people waking up to the Living End meta and, you know, being more prepared for that. So I definitely think that it's a good spot for Belcher now.
I do have a question for you, Sharif, regarding the challenge, because with all due respect that I have for Dylan, facing twice Calibrated Blast, do you really think that right now it's time to still on playing this deck? Is it real? Is it not real? And perhaps it's a question for all of you, because I still think that the deck is being played by a lot of people. I don't know if it's just because it's hyped. It never changed a lot. Like I understand that we have this new creature that costs 15 mana, but it's not something that really changed entirely the whole like archetype of the deck, right? So what do you think, guys?
So Blast still does see a lot of play, and I in all honesty, I think Blast is at its core, it's a combo deck, but it's also a gamble. Anytime you queue up a league with Blast, you're going to sit down and go, all right, I need to look for a hand that has Blast or some way else to win the game. If not, I'm going to lose. And Blast does a powerful thing. Shooting people for 15 is very strong. And it's good at it when it does it, but a lot of matches, like I think I saw in Sharif's match in the challenge, they didn't draw their 3rd land by the time, which is crazy with being a high land deck. They didn't draw their 3rd land by the time Sharif just activated the... Sorry, my cat's saying hello. By the time Sharif activated the Belcher, and then other times they just couldn't deal enough damage in time. There's a lot of ways to get around Blast from a lot of decks. You can counter it, you can just play a Leyline, you can gain life, etc. But Blast will do the one thing, and it will do it as much as it can. And I'll pass it to Sharif and his experience in the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting to see it twice, and I also think that probably it had the misfortune of running into Belcher as well, because that probably seems like, I mean, it felt like we creamed them. I think we like 2-0 them both times, and it didn't really feel like they had a chance to sort of stand up before we sort of shot them down.
That's crazy, because I think actually that Calibrated Blast has like a kind of good matchup against Belcher. You normally deal already like 6 damage to you if you play 2 untapped lands. So you go already to 14, right? So that's the only thing that I think.
So Belcher can just be faster than Blast, but also Leyline is very annoying, because that's how, you know, I've beaten Blast with Belcher, and that's how I watched Sharif beat it in the challenge, was just laying a Leyline and then going off on turn 4 or 5, and the Blast opponent just couldn't answer it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Leyland's one thing. They also run 4 Besage, or at least they should. Like, maybe they weren't running 4 Besage, or maybe one of them wasn't. I feel like they definitely need to be, especially since I mean, it would certainly help that matchup, because if we got, like, Stone Rained once, or, like, even if they can just get rid of the Leyline with it, it's super good. But yeah, Robert, do you have any thoughts on Calibrated Blast, Belcher matchup, either or?
Yeah, so Belcher is definitely favored in that matchup. What you have to consider is that you shouldn't bolt in your lands in that matchup. If you can force them to use 2 blasts to kill you, then they need at least until turn 5 to kill you, which means that you're probably fast enough to kill them, even if all your lands are tapped. And post-board you have Leyline, so that's already great. And as far as I'm aware, they do run the playset of Boseijus, but they are splitting them among main and sideboard, so they don't have all the Boseijus in the main deck. I think it's 2-2.
Okay, thank you
So,
all. I just wanted to check out like your thoughts about that. It's something like that. It really came to my attention that you had to play like twice. Perhaps there were the only 2 Calibrated Blast players in the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, they really have to run hot. I mean, especially they have an added dimension of chance to their deck. So yeah, they definitely had to run hot if they want to get like if they wanted to do well in the challenge. I think definitely getting in the way of a few of them with Belcher is definitely sort of stopping them from doing that. So, but
I pulled off to the side real quick, and I'll let Bob get his thought in here real quick. I just did want to mention in one of the most recent challenges, and I do feel like this is a healthy meta, or this is what you'll expect to see no matter what you're playing. The top 8 in the most recent challenge, there was Hammer Time, Murktide, Yawgmoth, 4-color Living End, Rhinos, and Elementals. I feel like that's probably what you're going to see most of the time, no matter what you're playing or where you're playing. As that looks very accurate for challenge meta, but also just in leagues, I would also expect to see this.
Just one quick thought for Blast. Blast has a very good 4-color matchup, I think even significantly better than Belcher. And as we saw from your challenge, there was probably a lot of 4-color in that challenge. So that's probably why those people picked Blast, and it was probably a good choice for them.
Yeah, as mentioned, 4C will be in a lot of, I think in your challenge metas, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sharif, I haven't played one recently, but you're going to see a lot of 4C and Cascade decks, etc. Just a lot of stuff in general that will be consistently good, and I think Blast attacking a certain one is a good plan. I've done that with Belcher before in certain metas, but as a whole, Blast is probably going to lose to itself and other decks more than it will be taking down all the 4C decks. Was there anything else that you had really noticed from your challenge run, Sharif?
I mean, I think I was just really interested in sort of like the lack of diversity. I mean, I could have gotten really lucky / unlucky / a bit of chance thrown in that I played. Like it was the first, I think, three matches in a row was just 4-color, and it was just like it was really bizarre to play. And like opponent reveals Yorion, it's like, oh, again, it's like very interesting. It's okay, next round is it going to be Murktide? Is it going to be Living End? Because these decks are just like so ubiquitous now, and you're just expecting to see like turn 1 Steam Vents or turn 1 Spirebluff Canal into like cycle a bird into your graveyard. But it was just like Yorion, and then Calibrated Blast, and Calibrated Blast again, which is really, really bizarre. But I think it was definitely like totally the meta for Belcher, if there ever was one. And I think the time is now, if that's any indication. I mean, that was obviously there's definitely a huge element of chance into running into those matchups like that. And it's not fully indicative of the entire metagame, but it's certainly something. And I think it should be taken as a sign of a vote of confidence for Belcher and other combo decks right now.
Yeah, I think that. Go ahead, Riker.
Sorry, the time is now is a very accurate statement, and this goes both ways for Oops All Spells and Belcher. All the matchups you mentioned in your challenge run would have also been great for Oops All Spells. Again, I'm going to test it in an upcoming challenge, and I'll definitely give my results in our next episode about that too, along with it being in the Discord. Go ahead, Sam. You got a thought here.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with what you said, Riker. If Upsal Spells is having success in Magic Online, there's certainly something that is not happening in the meta correctly. So yeah, basically, I think it's the time to pick up Belcher.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me, like the play rate of Belcher must be like it's so low. I just played a mirror the other day, actually, which was great to see. Actually, it was a bit encouraging because it was like I hadn't played a mirror in like 3 months, and that means I hadn't seen Belcher or played against Belcher in like months, which was pretty interesting. Yeah, exactly. And so that was good to see at least, but it really seems like people have forgotten about this deck, which is really good for us. Like I've read like Reddit posts about like challenge results, and like whenever they mention Belcher, it's like they forgot about it, or they think it's like just hiding in a cave, like waiting to do some funny things, and that it's basically being disregarded by the community, which I think is great for us, to be honest, because the more people disregard a deck, the more people are unprepared for it and forgetting how it works and forgetting how easily they can lose to it if they don't respect it. So the time's now.
Yeah, people are certainly starting to forget how to play against this deck. For example, today I had an opponent just play their Boseiju, and they had enough lands to play, so they just decided not to use it.
Yeah, I think the same happens also to Uso Spells. People are siding in Lavinia against Uso Spells. Guys, dude, please.
Do not play Lavinia against us, please. Your poor human's opponent slammed a Lavinia on the table, and you just paused and went, all right, and then proceeded to combo off. And all Lavinia does against Upsal Spells is it stops your Salvage Titan from resolving. That's it. The Salvage Titan still triggers the Vengevines and everything else, and you just swung in for lethal. I thought Humans was going to be a hard matchup because they're kind of like a 5-color Taxes deck, but you rolled over that opponent.
Yeah, yesterday I actually faced it also. They are playing now this new Humans deck. It's like a kind of pot deck, like Birthing Pot.
Yeah, these Pyre of Heroes.
Correct,
it got 9th place in a challenge, I believe.
Yeah, so I faced it today twice, yesterday twice also. This taking turn Asmo deck is also appearing a lot.
You mean Aspiring Spike?
Yeah, this one. I played against
Dream Crushed him today.
Yeah, sorry.
He was 4-0 and then he got paired with you, and I just knew it was over.
Yeah, but the good thing is I got my 5-0 thanks to him, so it is what it is.
Dream Crush. It's so fun, especially when it's somebody like Aspiring Spike.
Nice.
We all love crushing Aspiring Spike streaks.
Nice 5-0 donation. So I'm not sure if we're sort of running on empty here, but I'm going to maybe posit a few things that I've been testing with Belcher since I'm sort of preparing to decide what I'm going to bring to like a local big paper tournament. So I've been testing a few things, see what feels right. I played like 2 main deck endurances in the challenge, which ended up being completely nonsense useless. So like my rationale with that is like, if I'm going to play against Living End, it's going to be nice to have those there once in a blue moon. If it's giving me like 10% extra chance to win, maybe I want that. I'm now figuring out that maybe I don't actually want that. If it's going to be dead in the majority of other matchups, it still needs more time. I think probably like if I want to have the most consistent results, I'd probably like Fury more like in that spot, just because it's just going to be most likely it's going to hit more things the majority of the time. So I'm going to be testing that for the next few days and see where that lands us. Although I've decided that if any 2 cards are going to be at spot, it's going to be sideboard cards, because I look at my sideboard, I love all these cards, and I don't want to get rid of any of them. So whatever it's going to be, I'm sticking them in there, and I just need to figure out which 2 cards I want to bring in there.
Are you playing Pyromancer Ascension in the main break?
I'm not. Okay. I'm not. That's another option. That's another reasonable option that I could definitely need to consider as a little edge as well.
Okay.
It's an interesting thing to bring up, because I was very high on Fury in the main for quite a while back in the day.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I think it might be time to try it in the main board again, especially with Ledger Shredder being added to the ranks in Murktide. It just gives it more things to hit.
For sure, yeah. Ledger Shredder Ragavan, that's perfect for. Ledger Shredder Darcy, that's perfect for if they don't have Delirium. But yeah, I think especially like now that we have these extra spots because I'm not running second Reforge, and the other spot would be like Ascension Main or like one funky thing. So now that I have two spots, I think yeah, Fury is definitely an option, especially since I feel like I'm not actually cutting anything for it. Because before, sometimes we would greed and like cut a Striker Rich or cut a land, so we can stick all these chunky cards in there and get the most possible value. But now that I don't actually have to do that to bring those extra cards in, it feels a lot more organic in the way we can include those cards, which is definitely feeling good.
Also, and it's super random, but it helps me. I think I did it only once. And when I play against Living End, I pitched my Furies just to put them in the graveyard, and they came back. I know, Robert, you don't like this idea, but I'm just saying, like, perhaps it's something that I did. It worked out this time. I don't think it will ever work again, but it was the dream.
This is a good plan with other decks. If you can pitch Solitude, it's great. If you can discard Sun Titan to hand size or Primeval Titan, these are good. Fury won't do, I think. That's just not enough.
It works. What Sam is saying does work, but the issue with Fury and Belcher is that Fury buys you time, but I don't think it buys you enough meaningful time since you are pitching a red card, etc. You're not accelerating your game plan most of the time when you have Fury. So your Living End opponent can just go again or get through your Fury, and you've kind of run out of time by that point. I've been trying some other combo decks for sure. I've been, dipping my toes in the water of our combo cousins. And Heliod is bad. Unfortunately, it hurts me to say, but Heliod is bad. Murktide can really beat down on that deck. They get so much card selection that your Spike Feeder's not surviving, or they'll have a counter for your Heliod, etc. I have tested it quite a bit, and it's just been heartbreaking to play every time.
But you play Ranger, right? With Ranger, you protect your combo.
Yeah, I have 4 Rangers and 4 Teferis, but you're generally slow. You can ramp. You'll usually have one piece of ramp, but they have so much card selection that a Murktide will beat you down before you can really win it over. And again, Prismatic Ending is still played, and that is just kind of the bane of Heliod's existence. That's why Heliod was so good, was here's my enchantment that is a combo piece that you can't interact with. It's lost that edge. So I'm going to have to put Heliod back on the shelf. I'll maybe come back around to it if the meta shifts up. I do like that Heliod is very favored against Living End. There's a lot of things you can do that just help beat against Living End, but I haven't seen enough Living End recently to justify it. I also, and Sharif was there with me, but I also tried Ad Nauseam. Just, that's a deck that's near and dear to my heart. I loved Ad Nauseam when it had Simian Spirit Guide. One of my favorite decks to play. But it's a 3-card combo deck now instead of a 2-card combo deck. And even with Offer does make for some cute lines where you can go off with Ad Nauseam like you used to back in the day, because Offer plus a free spell will make the mana. But Ad Nauseam's issue is that most of the time you'll only have 2 combo pieces, and you'll be sitting there trying to draw your third. You do nothing, and then you lose. I even took a crack at a very aggro deck that I call Sideways Tribal. It's quite a lot of fun. It's just playing the best red cards and turning them sideways, but my co-hosts don't care for that. It's not what we're here for. I'll leave the aggro deck out of this. Stick to combo, right? Aggro is just a good mental break, but keep playing combo for sure. What other weird decks have we been playing around here?
I do have a question here, because I know that Sharif is playing a lot of Legacy. And
Legacy Ant, right?
Yeah, so my question here actually is, do we have to think Ad Nauseam being played like Ant in Legacy, like relying more on Ad Nauseam and not trying to find the 3 pieces? I kind of want to start playing Ad Nauseam and try to do something different. But I think that the problem actually is to think that we need to have the 3 pieces in our hand to win, instead of just thinking of, let's try to find Ad Nauseam, let's draw a lot of cards, and from there on we can win. Um, and perhaps,
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
yeah, think more of a profane tutor in finding more like the part that you need to cast ad nauseum and not die to it, right?
It would be difficult for Modern, though, to kind of perform at the level that Legacy Ant does, though, right?
Yeah.
Because Legacy Ant uses Ad Nauseam as just a draw engine, and then they cast Tendrils for 5 or to 10 and kill you, because they have so much free acceleration that triggers Storm.
I think it would be really interesting to sort of try and make it like a grape shot, Past in Flames, Ad Nauseam deck. You'd have to have like
But they
some
do
sort
it.
of protection. Maybe you'd play discard. Sorry?
I think we're missing the part that now it's possible, guys. Like now you have an offer you can use to counter the intervention pact. You counter another pact of negation, and you play Lightning Storm as we did it before. And that's the thing. I think that
On average, though, in Modern, you won't be able to draw as many cards with the Ad Nauseam.
Because it depends how you cater your deck, right? It depends how you cater. Because if you make if you put 4 Profane Tutors, if you put like 4 Offer, you put like 4 0 mana packs, that's like a lot of 0 and 1s. You would need probably a lot of the mana. A lot of the high CMC would probably come in like the mana acceleration, like Pentad Prism running 2 might hurt you a bit more, but you probably
need to run Lotus Bloom too, I can imagine.
Right, that would be really good for sure. That sounds really interesting. Maybe we should get to work on something like that. That sounds pretty exciting. But
so I've seen a Twiddlestorm list try this to try and play an Ad Nauseam package where they draw a good chunk of their deck and can go off, I think, even without Lotus Field, just because they have so many cheap spells that they can counter with their offer that they can't refuse. And alternatively, if you haven't made your land drop, you can also just play the Lotus Field and go off that way. So you have so that's one option to get your Underworld Breach Ad Nauseam combo in.
We should definitely talk about this Ad Nauseam more, and we can come back with results. I did want to ask, Bob, your favorite card ever printed in all of Magic, Metalwork Colossus. I've heard you're doing some stuff with this.
I'm always doing stuff with Metalwork Colossus in every format. I guess not in Legacy, but still in almost every format that it's legal in. Another format that it's legal in is in Pioneer, where I have recently built a Metalwork Colossus list. This one uses Brass Knuckles to pay 4 mana to get 8 devotion for the Metalwork Colossus, or Anchor to Reality to tutor Parhelion 2 into play, which also adds a lot of devotion to Colossus, and allows you to play Metalwork Colossus fairly quickly on turn 4 or even turn 3. There are also modern lists, and there was a standard list when it was legal. So I'm always trying all things Metalwork Colossus.
I'm sure you could do something with it in Vintage.
Oh my gosh!
Just put it in Vintage shops.
But Bob, did you took the deck to a league? I can imagine. How do you feel it against the traditional meta that you right now see in Pioneer?
In Pioneer, I played through several leagues, and I'm positive. I had 1, 2, 3. I had lots of 3/2s, and I had 1 4/1. So it seems fine.
So Bob is allowed to play with fun stuff and win, but when I play with fun stuff, I just go negative. That seems fair.
Well, that depends. I also played Ad Nauseam and lost every game in the entire league.
We'll definitely have to try and fine-tune Ad Nauseam, see what we can do with it. We are getting close. Is there anything else that somebody wanted to bring up?
I'm feeling pretty good about how we've covered things, but yeah, if there's any closing thoughts about how we're feeling about future Magic things, current Magic things.
Next time, I think we're going to do the versus thing, right? Like Belcher versus Upsal spells.
Yeah, we can do like a game show.
Yeah, we did brief, but it would be fun to kind of pin me and Sam versus Bob and Sharif about the 2 decks. Unfortunately, though, I think just Belcher might be better, but I like Oops, and I do think Oops does effectively as well as Belcher currently.
On the counter side, Oops beats Belcher, and
Totally.
I lost.
I
boy,
can't
we're
remember
gonna-
the last time I lost against Belcher with Oops All Spells. That's the truth.
We're getting the heat build up over here. We're about to throw some hands. You better tune into our next episode to hear how it goes. Shameless self-plug time. We have been streaming a lot more, all four of us as a whole. We're putting out multiple streams a week, and we've been getting a lot better at our stream qualities. We have cameras there so that you can see our beautiful faces, so that you know we're just not voices to you. Except Bob, you know, he's Mr. Incognito. But you've probably seen him everywhere else, like the Mox. We have MTG Bot finally. We're getting all professional and official and all that. I'll definitely link the Twitch so you can see us play these decks live. And you might even get to see us play what we will come up with for that ad nauseum list on stream. We'll see how that goes. Aside from that, I am Riker, also known as Dredge the Bed on the internet. I'm going to sign off here, and I will see you guys in the next episode.
Yeah, thank you guys all for listening, and I hope you have yourself a wonderful day. I'll give it off to Robert and Sam to say their goodbyes, and yeah.
Yeah, keep on belching. See ya.
Keep on playing Oops. It's the truth.
That one. I like that one.
It would rhyme.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.